books on modern warfare?
Yes, Anavel Gato, the Nightmare of Solomon.
Mora, I think they said Gato.
Oh god, no way, we're talking about the guy who was on the graduation exam at the Academy! Lieutenant Anavel Gato, the ace pilot of Vice Admiral Dozel Zabi's Space Assault Corps, for Christ's sakes!
Anavel Gato, the primary antagonist of Gundam 0083 Stardust Memory, the pilot of the Neue Ziel and the Nightmare of Solomon. His reputation precedes him quite so. But my question today, how did he get his reputation? Chuck Keith states that Gato is mentioned in the textbooks on modern warfare at the Federation Academy due to his feats at the Battle of Solomon. That seems all well and good at first, but from a writing standpoint, this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. What exactly did Gato do? The official account, and I put official in quotations because the official canon of Gundam is still a subject of great debate even to this day, but the official story is that Anavel Gato fought off a Federation pursuit fleet that was chasing his squadron as they fled Space Fortress Solomon after Admiral Dozel Zabi called for a retreat. Gato fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal and decimated the pursuing Federation crafts, leaving very few survivors, and he did the greater portion of this either solo or with only 1 or 2 wingmen. The Federation survivors described the incident as a nightmare, and thus Gato earned his alias. So what exactly is the problem here? Well, for starters, the Battle of Solomon was one of the bloodiest battles in the One-Year War. While it's likely that Operation British and the Battle of Abawaku have higher death counts than Solomon, this battle has to at least be in the top 5 bloodiest. In addition to that, there are several other factors that I think are a bit more history-worthy than Gato's exploit. Both factions introduced new weapons that led to countless deaths in this battle alone. The Federation's Solar Flare system, which would go on to inspire other super weapons for years to come, and Zeon's Big Zam, perhaps one of the most iconic mobile armors in all of Gundam. On top of all that, the battle also saw the death of Dozel Zabi, son of Dagon Zabi, the Sovereign of Zeon. That's basically the equivalent of a prince dying on the battlefield. Looking at it as a piece of fiction and not just in order of events, this is also the first time that we as an audience experienced Amuro's new type abilities developing beyond simple piloting skills and reflexes and bordering on the realm of the supernatural, with Amuro seeing what the narrator describes as the dark shadow of hate that dwells within the depths of Dozel's heart. Now let's revisit Gato's feat. According to the Nightmare of Solomon one-off comic that was featured in the Gundam Ace magazine, Gato is shown destroying 2 Salamis-class battleships and roughly 12 Federation mobile suits, give or take. These events are recreated in the game Gundam Encounters in Space, during the animated cinematic that plays when Amuro gets the chance to challenge Gato during a what-if scenario. It should also be noted that this comic was released a mere 3 days before Encounters in Space hit store shelves, so it's likely that these pieces of media were meant to mirror each other. So far, not a very impressive kill count, but that's only one small comic that's basically just a promotion for an upcoming game. Now let's look at Gundam 0083 Rebellion. This manga is a retelling of the events of Stardust Memory, with some changes, but the Battle of Solomon still takes place in a flashback, so I think this part in particular could be considered as standard canon, similar to how Gundam The Origin depicted the canon backstory of Char and Sayla when we hadn't seen it in depth up to that point but heard it talked about numerous times. In this depiction, he is described as destroying 8 battleships and several mobile suits. Quite a much more impressive number. Even Zeon's most iconic ace pilot, Char Aznable, only shot down 5 battleships at the Battle of Loom, where Char earned his moniker of the Red Comet, and the Federation didn't even have mobile suits that early on. So just kill for kill, that does seem more impressive, but we have to take scaling into account here. At Loom, Char was using a Zaku 2, albeit one with a stronger booster than the standard F-Type model, but Gato was using a Rikdom with a beam bazooka. During the early months of the war, Zeon didn't even have beam weaponry for their mobile suits yet. So this is roughly the equivalent of comparing the results of precision with a rifle to bullet hosing everything with a Gatling gun. Of course, the stronger weapons are going to get more kills. In addition to that, if you wanted to, you could call into question the validity of Rebellion's account of the event, since it mentions that Gato began his rampage after finding out that Dozel Zabi was KIA, while the previous sources state that he only found this out after fleeing the battlefield. If nothing else, it creates an inconsistency in data. On top of that, Gundam canon, as I mentioned earlier, is a mess. The only things that are set in stone canon and not up for dispute are animated works, according to Gundam's main publisher, Sunrise, but even that creates discrepancies, which we'll touch on in a later video. This is the problem with retconning. If you don't adequately plan out your story when making events retroactively canon, it can lead to some plot holes, or at the bare minimum, some events that simply don't make sense in the grand scheme of the work. So I return to my main question. Why was Gato so feared at the Battle of Solomon? Compared to the casualties inflicted by the Big Zam, Gato's kill count was but a drop in the bucket. The death of a member of the Zabi royal family and the horrendous amount of lives lost should far outweigh one pilot's exploits, unless he was the one to destroy the Big Zam and kill the Zabi, of course. This is the equivalent of taking the Battle of Yavin from Star Wars, where Luke Skywalker destroyed the Death Star, the Rebellion was saved, Governor Tarkin and the majority of the 501st Legion were killed, but in the history books, giving significant mention to this random Y-Wing pilot that's seen flying away from the battle. 30 Rebel fighters attacked the Death Star, and only 4 returned. Luke Skywalker, the hero of the rebellion, Han Solo, who saved Luke's life, Wedge Antilles, who is a skilled pilot in his own right, and this random Y-Wing pilot. Despite all the other Y-Wings getting shot down, this one made it back. May history never forget him. For this to be logical at all, I'll have to fall back on an old adage. The winners write the history books. The Earth Federation was the victor of the Battle of Solomon and the One-Year War, and it was the account of the surviving Federation soldiers that described Gato as a nightmare, similar to how, in some Gundam works, other Federation soldiers compared Char's custom Zaku to a red comet, though in the anime adaptation of Gundam the Origin, it seemed to be the Black Tri-Stars who gave him this nickname. So that's likely what we have here. Simple accounts of survivors who witnessed the carnage up close and personal, recounting the tales of how they barely survived the encounter. In addition to that, Gato's custom-colored Rick Dom likely had something to do with him being more memorable. According to Gundam 0080, War in the Pocket, apparently the Xeon standard for dubbing someone an ace pilot is that they only need to shoot down 5 enemies.
Hey, Bernie, so sorry. Only 1 kill on your race, huh?
You only have 4 under your belt? I figured you would at least gotten 20 by now!
With so few kills needed to attain the status of ace, Gato would definitely have that prerequisite before the Battle of Solomon. If we follow the pattern of several other Xeon aces, they are allowed to have their own custom-colored units to distinguish themselves on the battlefield. Even if Gato didn't have a moniker before this battle, he carved his place into history with this savage retaliation. Further still, if we take the weapons used into account, that could help bolster the logic of the Federation viewing this as such a massacre and not just a simple battle. Rick Doms are standard mass-produced units at this point in the war. Shortly before the Battle of Solomon, we saw that Amuro destroyed several of these while battling in the space around Side 6. If one Gundam can handle roughly a dozen Rick Doms, and even decently skilled GEM pilots can defeat them without much issue, then how is this one doing such damage to the pursuit fleet? It may have something to do with that massive beam bazooka Gato is packing. It wasn't exactly mass-produced during the One-Year War, but we did see a few others wielding it. But I think it more so goes back to one of Char Aznavour's most famous beliefs. The quality of the weapon is less important than the one wielding it. That's how I see the in-universe logic working anyway. For me to justify it in the real world, though, I myself see this as a Battle of Thermopylae situation. Though historically there were thousands of Greek soldiers present at the Battle of Thermopylae, the most remembered part of this event is the small group of 300 Spartans. Even if, in the grand scheme of the battle, they had a smaller part to play than the rest of their allies, their legacy survives. To be clear with the intent of this whole video, I'm not at all doubting Gato as a fierce warrior. We see that for ourselves in 0083. The only question I have is how he got his legacy at the Battle of Solomon, as it does seem to conflict with the pre-established canon. If it had been any other battle of the war, except maybe a Bawaku, I would have just accepted it and moved on. I'm also not the only one who's had this question, as I've seen it circulating around on several forums before. It also doesn't help that earlier bits of lore that were released prior to the more accurate versions depicted Gato as having his Gelgoog at the Battle of Solomon, and the prototype beam rifle is bigger than the mobile suit itself. This itself seems to be a contradiction because Gelgoogs weren't widely spread at that point in the war. They were being test piloted by groups like the Chimera Corps, and we have confirmed that there was at least one on Earth during Lost War Chronicles also wielding a prototype beam rifle. Some question whether or not Gelgoogs were in deployment at the Battle of Solomon at all. The in-game cinematic from Encounters in Space and Zeonic Front depicts a Gelgoog shield flying past an exploding Rick Dom that's getting caught in the blast of the solar flare system, and the use of a new model mobile suit would stand out a lot more in this battle, but I'm pretty sure that this has been declared non-canon by recent materials putting Gato in a Rick Dom. Or heck, for all we know, his Rick Dom got severely damaged and he returned to grab his Gelgoog before going out for more kills, similar to how at Abawaku, his Gelgoog lost its arm and he tried to relaunch in a different mobile suit. Either way, Anavel Gato made his mark on history that day and would continue to strike fear into the hearts of the Federation forces to the day he died, true to his beliefs and a soldier to the end. But what do you think? Which version of Gato's story do you like best? Did he have his Gelgoog at the Battle of Solomon, or was it just his Rick Dom, or both? Are there any other Gundam discussion topics you'd like me to cover? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.